Welcome to our third video in this orientation to continual improvement. The topic of this one will be understanding the current state of maturity. Now, we've introduced the role of the executive and the role of senior management, the responsibility for improvement, and also the concept of process and its centrality in understanding the way work is being done. Next, we're going to ask ourselves a question. How do we know if our organization has become mature in its application of process thinking throughout this whole organization? So I'd like to begin with some words of wisdom from Yoda, the Grand Jedi Master Knight. And he said, always more questions than answers there are. And I think he would be agreeing with Drucker about the need for the questions. But then he said, control. You must learn control. You can't use a tool, whether it be a lightsaber or some sort of statistical or lean tool, without understanding what does it take to control or manage and wield that in the proper way. And it says, if you can't believe it, that is why you have failed. In other words, if we cannot assume that we are going to be moving forward, if we do not believe the state of success is attainable, we can't achieve that. We are self-defeating ourselves and our capability. So let's take an honest look at what are we doing today. So what is the desired state of a process? And there are assumptions that we have. We see all work is done in interconnected processes. Performance varies over time and we can measure it. Sources of variation are discoverable by analysis, and reducing variation improves process performance. And we've seen in the past that 3 cycles of learning are needed to get this process so we can move it towards a state of continual improvement, keeping the emphasis on finding and discovering opportunities for improvement, and then advancing the process so that it maintains both stability, in other words, we eliminate wild variations in performance, as well as predictability in ever-tightening bands of performance. And that's what we would like to have happening. So the outcome is a stable work system that produces results that are predictable with a high probability of success. Now, there are 2 perspectives of process activities. One perspective is the customer's perspective. And what they see is the overall performance from the setting of their expectations that they would like to be receiving from us to the actual perception of what they did receive, and they take a look and say, is there some gap between those? Now, when we look at processes, we look at them very differently. We divide that overall customer perspective into a series of actionable steps that have been assigned responsibility to people we call process owners or functional managers, depending on the particular tasks that they're doing. And so we see within each of those functions, we see a sequence of activities, maybe tightly coupled or loosely coupled. But what we do is we can measure cycle time or lead time performance within each of the activities. And we believe then that if we hold each individual responsible for the quality of their work, that the overall result will be achieved that matches the customer's expectations. So this process is the series of activities that transforms inputs into outputs using resources that have been allocated and paid for by management in response to some requests from customers. So requests originate from the customers of the process, and we, together with the suppliers of the process, provide what is necessary to satisfy those requests. So we can illustrate everything by a process. And that's the critical thing we want to understand. So this is a common way of seeing things, an understanding work that builds mutual understanding about how we collaborate together to produce results on behalf of our customers. Now, when we're looking at customers, we have to see one customer is not really the spokesman for all customers. We may have different points of view. So a point of view might be a financial point of view from a buying customer, or it might be a user's point of view from an operator. It might be an engineer's point of view from an installer viewpoint, or it might be a software person's point of view who's going to be integrating this particular system into an overall enterprise management system. Each of those different points of view may have a different hot button, if you will, or requirement, and we call these the voice of the customer. Those are the specific needs which the customer voices say, we need to have this. So the needs will change as a function of what is that point of view. And so we can take a look at what is the overall requirement for any system by first identifying appropriate points of view and then conducting an inquiry into each of those in terms of what are the requirements that they specify. Now, customer requirements typically should be based on targeted customers, those customers that we are attempting to satisfy, not necessarily customers who just come by and say, hey, I'm a customer, but we are designing a product to meet a particular need. And so the customer, the target customer, should be the one who is expected to receive the benefit. We express these as a noun verb. So what is it that the customer is getting out of the product? So a pencil might make marks or erase marks. And so those are the things that the pencil might be doing. If I have a smart pencil, maybe it will translate words. Maybe it will, so that's another noun verb phrase. Maybe it will correct spelling. And so that's another noun verb phrase. And those then have different implications in terms of what that pencil will do and how it connects to the rest of the world. So the beneficial purpose of that outcome should produce value to the customer that they are willing to invest in to achieve that particular outcome. So performance should be delivered, should be objective within limits that are agreed. So if I'm expecting a translation pen, I maybe select the languages, or I have a limited number of languages from selection. Because if it's going to be every language in the world, you know, there might be thousands of languages that could be used, many different scripts, many different things to be read. And it requires a very different type of system and support mechanism. So testing methods need to verify that the results are agreed and standardized. So for instance, if I'm a hospital patient and I want decreased waiting time during the admittance process so that I have no anxiety about the poor health condition that I'm perceiving, and I would rapidly want to feel better. So when I take a look and I say the waiting time, I'm willing to wait 5 to 15 minutes and then get my test results. So between check-in and initiation of this, and then after that, maybe a separate time period for waiting for delivery of test results. But I was reading a study in female cancer patients where they take days to be able to get the appointments, and then it maybe even take over 30 days to get the results of the testing. And what happens in that period of time? The customer builds anxiety. Why? Because the performance of that system is not meeting their human need for anxiety reduction. They're nervous and they keep getting more and more nervous the longer the time domain happens. So this is something we have to think about. What is it the customer really needs? How will they judge us? How will they measure us against that requirement? So the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we really know our customers? If we exist for our customers, it's important to understand what does it take to get the customer's job done. So why is the customer coming to us? What is the job they expect us to perform on their behalf? And then we have to create a business model that actually responds to that particular need and effectively delivers products or services to meet the customer so they can get their job done. So, some questions to ask and think about. Are all of your customers equally valuable? Are some of them providing more value to you, or do you provide more value to some different types of customers? If your customers are not equally valuable, then what should be your response to design a business model and the routine work processes serve them with an attractive value proposition for each different level of value that different customers are seeking? How do you logically classify your customers? This is typically called segmentation or market segmentation. It's identifying rational subgroups of customers with common needs. And what characteristics do you use to discriminate among these segments? So what are those important things that you have to use to differentiate? And then how does that give you some feeling about what you could do differently to serve those customers? Now, if we focus on high-value customers, since not all customers are equally critical, not all customers are also equally profitable. And it's important to establish a prioritized approach to delivering value to customers. So what does it mean to be profitable? It might be level of service that we're able to give, or it might be the amount of return that we get, or it might be conformance to a particular set of organizational rules or principles. So we have to start by targeting customers based on their value and the rational subgroup that they represent of common value, and determine what functions or features do they desire most strongly. And then we have to work to identify the value proposition that would be most meaningful to them to achieve excellence in that particular application. So we should specify the targeted customers, identify the desired feature or function, and then how do we respond with a definition of a value proposition to that customer that at least satisfies their need, or satisfies it better than the competition or the alternative choices that customers could make. So maturity as an organization is going to begin by understanding our customers better than the competitors understand their customers. It's by having this close association where we can understand the motivations of customers for wanting or using particular services. And then why do the customers act or behave the way that they do towards our organization as we provide them those services? So what do we mean by maturity? Well, in psychology, it has very little to do with age, but it's related to the ability to act or to cope and reason in an appropriate way according to the situation. So we have to be able to interpret situations and from that situation, develop our set of rules for how do we respond to this? What is going to be our way of coping? So do we have a robust approach? And in a robust approach, what we do is we basically say, all of these criticisms are going to bounce off, we don't change. So we have a strong approach. Do we have an adaptive approach where we change based in response to what the customers are asking? So we have more flexibility. And then how do we reason about our best way of acting in those situations? Do we have learning processes in approach where we can learn from those situations and then create, if you will, a situation where we have not only resilience, but also what you might call anti-fragility. Resilience says you bounce back to your original state. Anti-fragility says that you grow stronger because you've learned what the customers are looking for. Now, maturity is learned through an accumulation of experiences, and it's the result of healthy growth and development. So if you ask yourself, in a baby, for instance, which would you rather have, growth or development? Well, everybody is happy to see a baby grow, and yet, if that's all the baby does is grow and we don't see development of the mental state and the ability to move and so forth, we start to worry about the mental health of that child or the ability of that child to cope with the real world. And so we see we need to have both growth and development happening in consonance. So guidance in coping with an atypical situation is what we need to grow maturity in people and also in organizations. So how we deal with a crisis and make decisions provides good cues about the level of maturity that we have achieved. So we need to understand the current situation. As Einstein said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. So we're starting with an inquiry. John Dewey, in his 4 books on logic, started with the quest, and it was an inquiry into logic. So we have an inquiry. We don't assume the situation. We ask questions about it. Then we determine the current state by assessing the results of the questions that we ask. We probe to see what's going on, and then we ask questions about what is that current state. We establish a maturity goal to be achieved. So where are we now? Where do we want to be? And then we have to drill down to discover what are the weaknesses, what's holding us back from getting to where we want to be. And then we abandon ways of working that don't really work. This is the planned abandonment process of creative destruction. And then we eliminate waste that's rooted inside our processes. And finally, we define a pathway for improvement of results. So each of these steps is important to understanding the current state of what's going on. So how do we get there? Well, we have to find out, where are we? So have we neglected process development in our organizations in favor of more traditional management by functions? So if we look at our organization, we see everything is functionally managed. What do we see as the nature of process performance across the different functions? So there are some symptoms of process neglect. And we have to be honest with ourselves. Have we really neglected processes and the way we should have, if you will, flow happening across organizations that deliver performance? So the same old way of working is management uses functions to organize. It pays no attention to process management or using a systems approach to change. We're going to tell purchasing, you improve. We're going to tell IT, you improve. Each of them has different plans, and hopefully they can work out what they need to do on their own. So there is no will or enthusiasm for doing things differently from the normal legacy way of working. So why would I want to change? It's going to cost money. Why would I want to do something? I'll have to learn how to do things differently. And legacy operating characteristics, what we see is that management uses business restructuring to drive change by changing the managers. You know, how do you manage change? Well, you change the manager. Simple way. But firefighting teams, they fix chronic issues and problems. If you say in an organization they have the top 10 things that they're going to be looking at improving, ask yourself the question, how often do things actually go off the list, never to return? In other words, we actually solve those problems. Or does our top 10 just float around and we see that it's different? This week it's number 1, next week it's number 3. That's success. Oh, it's back to number 2. What happened? You know, so what we start finding out is that we haven't actually fixed the chronic problems. These errors keep repeating, and the top 10 list actually is just a collection of ideas that we have about issues we have in this organization that have not been properly addressed for the future. Now, process immaturity, not doing things right. We can actually grade this on 4 scales. So scale number 1 is, we're just going to call it the 0 level. And management uses functions to organize. They pay no attention to process management or a systems approach. There's no will or enthusiasm to do anything differently from the normal way of working. And so what they do is, we're going to reorganize. We'll have firefighting teams and so forth. The top 10 lists, all of those are the artifacts of this process neglect. Now, we can also go worse than that. We could have process resistance. This is this -1 level. So process behavior is passive aggressive. Whenever process change is happening, resources are shifted or the task is covertly diluted. So we say with our mouth we're going to do something, but the actions never follow through. So we may say we want to have these, we measure these things, but the product and quality efficiency are basically ignored, and the dominant performance becomes cost. We might also go to another level of neglect, and that is not resistance, but obstruction. And here we see the processes that do exist are regularly ignored and considered to be a deterrent to individualism. So workers detest the control and want to do things their own way. I've been doing this job for 20 years. You can't tell me what to do. So they simplify measurements, they distort or falsify results, and maybe they change it so management can't really tell what's happening. They'll use traffic lights. So the traffic light says it's red, yellow, or green. Well, I don't mind my process being yellow. It says I'm working on improvement. But I don't want it to be red, so I'm going to set the level where yellow changes to red, and I will change that level based on what it requires me to report. And so if quality is produced, it's really more by random chance or by accident, and there's no way to actually verify that performance. Now, another thing is it can go even worse than this obstruction. It can go to disruption. And here, workers collude to degrade, sabotage, or damage the change results. So we don't want to accept this process thinking. We say that's not the right way to do things. We have other ways to do things. And we start getting arguments around what system should we use? Should we use Agile? Should we use Lean? Should we use Six Sigma? Those are signs of disruption. When we can't agree on a measure, the question I would ask is, are you producing performance measurement systems or performance process systems, or are you producing your products or services? So you don't have to become experts in those. What you have to do is you have to become good at a system of improvement of the processes that can operate on a continual basis and increase your capability. So every time we start building little pockets of expertise, it's actually disrupting the organization. I've been in some companies, very large companies as a matter of fact, where a problem comes up and then the employee representative says, we have to facilitate this because it's an HR problem involving people. Lean people come in and say, there's cycle time that's being lost from wasted work, we have to facilitate it. Six Sigma people come and say, we are not measuring properly this process, therefore we have to put a measurement system in place and drive it with statistical variation. IT people say, we can solve all of this with an IT system. And then management saying, well, what do we do? Well, it's not a matter of choose one, it's a matter of choosing your own approach to how you build and manage a performance measurement system and how you manage the processes by which the business is coordinated and put together. Now, in the first orientation videos, we showed you this graphic where we saw that level 7 here is this conversion between daily management system is completed in design. We have processes specified, we have processes mapped, we have processes with performance measures, and they're all linked together, work processes to business processes, supported by an end-to-end measurement system. And then at the strategic level, we're dealing with the systemic change issues of the senior management, the middle and senior management teams. And what we see is each of these 10 levels has specifications. So we can judge where are we on each of those 10 levels. So in level 1, do we really know what a process is? A process means that we believe and we can specify it using some agreed upon attributes. So the key steps here is we have to develop awareness of process thinking and systems integration and distinguish between process workflows and functional tasks. At level 2, how do we understand the process? Is it an informal map? Everybody does it differently. So there are different names, hierarchy types, different types of flows, and there is no linkage among the different types of process maps. So they don't integrate across functions, businesses, or even the geographical separations of the organization. So to get started, we might actually define ISO 9000 procedures or a data flow in SAP. And these would be these informal types of approaches to the system where there's no guarantee that they'll all work together. Process level 3, process must be managed cross-functionally or there's no collaboration. So if functional management is managing the processes, then ownership occurs in name, not in practice. So process owners must have responsibility for the cross-functional processes. They need to review and evaluate process components of work throughout the entire process, end to end, and so that they can understand where in that process flow does the waste occur. At level 4, we're assigning experienced managers, people who have had experience in working with people, in doing the value-adding work of the organization as process owners. So they have a cross-functional definition of common processes, they have a process measurement system, they have a competence development system for each of the different functions operating within the process, they standardize the facilities for each place their processes are working, and they have budgetary control. So at this level, the process owner has fiduciary management responsibility, and that they have this aligned measurement system that allows them to understand how is this process actually performing. So this is now starting to build this daily management system. At level 5, we have standard process models. So we're able to use these things. And we can develop then a formal approach. So when we're calling something by one name someplace, the same thing is called by the same name in a different organization. So we have standardized, if you will, the products flowing through or the services flowing through that are created in the process, as well as the process names and the measurement system names. So what we want to do is review to make sure that the processes are actually following that standard model. At level 6, we're going to have performance measurement standardized. So we're going to have a standard measure for quality, for cost, for time, as well as for risk. And so this standard measurement system, once it's been developed, is going to be able to integrate from the bottom level of the operations of the organization to deliver the consolidated measurements that spell success at the top level of the organization. So there will be a function where we see Y is a function of X. Y is the output of the organization, the success measures of results. It's a function of all of the different factors in the work processes that contribute to the variation of that process. And those are the X factors, if you will. So at this point in time, the process has been formally developed. And at level 7, what we start doing is we're going to now integrate the work process level to the business process level. So all of the different tasks are coming together in a systems diagram. And so now we can see the end-to-end system, the flow from expectations of customers to fulfillment of those expectations. And we have an end-to-end measurement system that matches. So we can connect the system with data-driven facts and identify waste, loss, and opportunities for improvement. We can also then use this for what-if analysis. If I want to make an improvement, what would happen if I did this? And we could use simulation. We could start using some of the advanced data tools. We could have machine learning applied here, where we start saying what happens over time when these circumstances happen or occur. We can then learn from that organization what needs to get done. So the changes are then very critical in terms of success of the organization. At level 8, what we've done is we are saying, management is saying, as we assess this organization and the processes by which the system is structured, the business system is structured, we see there are specific dysfunctional areas that we can identify that we believe need to be improved with additional resources. So what we do is they are chartering then improvement projects that are for the whole system, the end-to-end system. We call these Hoshin Kanri projects. So they're strategic in nature, they're satisfying a strategic objective, integration of the system in a better way. And the way we set the targets for these is based on the starting process capability and the potential process capability that can happen as a result of the change. And that's the gap then we want to close by increasing the capability of the processes using the measurement system that we put in place. At level 9, we've now increased this, and it's not just a matter of part of the strategic planning process. We actually are using an adaptive feedback cycle to fine-tune and test this. So in the cycle of improvements at level 9, we're including this as part of our strategic planning process. So it is now a built-in element in that strategic planning process. Cycles of results work in continual refinement of the work. Fine adjustment is what Taiichi Ohno called it. And we have measurement control points that trigger teams to do something because we've now violated a performance indicator that says we need to keep this in a state of control. It's no longer in that state of control. And that way we can systematically drive out waste and enhance the throughput. Performance results are linked by line of sight measurement system using work processes to increase the strategic capability of the business level processes. So this integration is now operating. And at level 10, what we see is that this is embedded in the multiple year annual strategic plans of the organization. We use scenario planning, options analysis, and what-if analysis, simulation analysis, and the annual strategy management process is actually looking at how do we formulate strategies for the future? What is the sequence of changes that we need to make over time? And then how do we implement that series of projects as a multi-generational, if you will, change process for this organization to achieve long-term strategic results? So there's an exercise organizations need to go through. As we look at this, there were 4 stages. The stage is negligent. There's neglect of process thinking. Hopefully you don't find yourselves there, but if you do, the steps to get out of that are actually pretty straightforward. Preliminary, discovering the process basics. Do we have processes? What are they? What is the process series of steps involved and so forth, the informal. And then developing the structure, the formalized processes, the formal measurement system that relates to those, and the prediction that comes because we can link the work level measurements and processes to the business level measurements and processes. And the strategic is we're designing the systematic or the systemic integration so we can see how the overall business performs as we start putting these building blocks together in the work process level. So where is our organization today? If you were to take a look at your organization, your company as a whole, where would you grade it on the scale of, well, let's not consider the negative scale, but from the scale of 1 to 10? What level of maturity do you believe your organization's today? And the perspective for your judgment is not what you would like, but it's your own process as you see it and perceive it today. And so would like you to take some time as a management team to take a look. And the first decision, is your organization's culture working on the negative side or on the positive side? Hopefully it's not the negative side. If it is, we need to talk. Second decision though is, if you're on the positive side, where are you? Now, one point to make here is that if you haven't done the first few steps, you don't get credit for jumping ahead and saying, oh, but we have this as strategy. No, because you're not building it up as a system. So these 10 steps need to be built up. First of all, you have to recognize what is a process. If you don't, how can you do the strategy stuff? It's not just informal, it has to be formally designed. You have to have measurement systems that come together. Work processes have to be done aligned to the strategic work. And so as you take a look, if you don't have that end-to-end view of both processes and measurements, you can't possibly let it go to the strategic level and do the right thing. So an unsatisfied level blocks further advancement, and that means that's your stopping point. That's the level that you can rise to. Most organizations, when they do this, they find that they're only at a level 3 or maybe 4. And so that's not unusual as a starting point. The question is, where do you want to be, and for what type of goals should you set for your organization? So how do you set your process material? So prior levels must be satisfied before advancing. You have to have complete execution of each step. Cycles of learning should also occur in each step. And you get to choose where you have been, if you will, on this scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10 if you don't want to use the neglect level of performance. So take a look at this, assign the ranks, take a look at the number of votes, and if there are some things that have been partially or fully achieved, note them so that you can get some idea on where are there needs for improvement in your process opportunities. So maturity equals excellence in execution. It's not achieved by good intentions. Now, just to give you some idea, this is a graphic of Toyota's way of designing work for workers. And so they have the first 4 levels of process maturity happening during the induction of workers in their education, where the focus is on cost. And so level 1, they said, everybody's ignorant, you have to start from scratch. We don't assume you know anything. And then you go to level 2 where you're learning knowledge, so it's lecture and study. Level 3 is discussion, reinforcing knowledge. What if? Have you seen this happen? And so forth. Talking with knowledgeable people. Then you have trainers working with you in what they call point and say. So you point at something, you read what it is as a standard, and then you do it. And somebody's watching you, following you step by step to make sure that you take each of those steps exactly as required. And then you go into practice. At this level, you're actually starting to build your first car. But you've got a supervisor or a mentor who's over your shoulder watching everything you do. And as you build this up, you demonstrate over maybe a year of time that you know how to do the standard practice. And at that point in time, you're doing the practice. And this may last for a 10-year period of time. And then at level 6, you're able to standardize and improve. You are actually participating in both aspects of work, doing the work and improving the work. And as you get better and better at making the contributions for improvement, you prove yourself eligible to go to level 7. And at level 7, you're able to instruct. And this is the first tier of being a supervisor. And now you don't only teach, but you manage culture. And so now we're no longer looking above this blue line, horizontal blue line. We're no looking at cost, we're looking at profit. And so the question is, can we do things to prevent the losses of profit throughout this organization? And levels 8 to 10 are able to manage in a global level, starting with a plant and moving forward, and now you're guiding change for the culture. And so each of those is a different way of building competence up in people, and it's part of the plan of the Toyota system. Now, there is a quality infrastructure implicit for maturity. So we incorporate a process perspective to daily management. We delegate management accountability for delivering performance results across the different functions. So each function has their own responsibility. And then they have this integrated approach, is this integrated business and operating processes, so the functions come together and combine to be jointly responsible for process throughputs. Designing and developing performance measurements to support predictive analytics. So the process is not just about reporting on things that were done, it's reporting on how consistently they've been done and how well they can be done in the future and what can be done to improve them. And then we establish a strategic management system to foster insight and select and resource strategic change projects. So one thing we see is that many times, as Peter Drucker has said, your culture eats your strategy for breakfast. So organizational culture can overcome the strategic change intent of your management. So why is this possible? Well, first, culture is the accumulation of beliefs, principles, morals, discipline-specific belief structures, ethics, ethnic issues, religious issues, as personal value, both individually as well as collectively. And it's created and influenced by the history of a coherent group within the organization, like a union or a shop group or a profession, like marketing people or welders. And it's also within the organization by what's happening in different industries. There are industry cultures in steel or automotive. There are market cultures in terms of how people want to operate. There are also types of employees. So management cultures versus worker cultures, management styles, and even national cultures. And combining these ingredients create what is an expected way of working together, which operates as an explicit cognitive system through which people interpret suggestions and orders that direct their individual and their combined behaviors. So strategy requires this collaboration of the entire organization to achieve its vision. If strategy is not aligned with culture, then culture eats your strategy for its breakfast. In other words, it's consuming the good intentions of management. Yeah, we want to do that, but it's going against the culture of the organization, and they will not move in that direction. So there is not indifference to this direction, but there is resistance and neglect and going down that dysfunctional route rather than process acceptance. So we need to ask ourselves, do we really have a quality culture? And culture describes this collective way that the group behaves. And so we see that it's self-reinforced and inculcated into all the members of our tribe, if you will, our family. And it's reinforced through storytelling and reinforcement by tribal elders. So when I was at Hewlett-Packard, one of the things we saw when we bought a new company, we put someone there who had long-term HP history that could tell the stories of what was important in HP in terms of behaviors and way of looking. So the first decision is, does our organization truly value quality as a guiding principle for its operations? In other words, we're always seeking goodness and avoiding badness. And how do we use this as an indicator for fulfillment of our purpose? Second decision, does our working style reflect quality in all aspects of our work? with the interrelations with both working colleagues as well as external partners like suppliers or customers in our system. So think about those things and take this survey. So this is 8 questions basically that you can use to understand where are you in terms of your quality culture. Is it very well developed, or is it need of some attention to detail by the management team? So how do we actually think about these things? So these 8 questions, do you feel you understand what is good quality in your personal work? To what degree are you familiar with your company's emphasis on quality? Do you believe quality is a top priority for your company's management, or do they delegate it to the work and say, that's ISO 9000, that's not what we do at the executive level? And if we don't do quality at the executive level, guess what? Quality becomes unimportant to everybody. So everybody has a definition of quality and something that they need to pay attention to. And we'll come back to this. To what degree do you agree with the statement, my manager's actions and plans convince me quality is important to the company? So we know what's important based on actions and plans. To what degree do you understand your work is being evaluated for quality? Everything considered, how do you rate your work group on providing high quality outputs and service? To what degree do you think your achievement of quality standards affects your performance evaluation? Well, that's not ISO 9000 standards, this is standard work, and there's a very big difference. ISO 9000 standards is standards with a big S, it's compliance. Work standards are about what we must do to achieve the throughput necessary for customers. They're 2 different things. And then finally, have you ever worked on a dedicated team that is doing a project for continual improvement of work? If we have continual improvement as a foundation of our organization, everybody at some point in time should have worked on at least one continual improvement project, because we're responsible for doing our work and improving that work over time. So, what do you want to learn to advance toward maturity? So what management work will be necessary to achieve it? So we have to identify guiding principles to establish a culture, discover how to manage cross-functional processes, form a linked and aligned system of work processes, create the sound metric systems, develop an evidence-based approach to working, understand the system integration effects, stimulate the desire of employees to work, and establish direction based on sound results indicators. These are the actions which take us across those 10 levels of maturity to ultimately develop a sound system that is able to have success driven by structured development of our processes. So again, we're going to close here, and thank you for bearing with us. We'll come back and we'll talk about the next ingredient that's so important in this, and that is understanding more deeply what do we mean by this idea of waste. Thank you.